Okay, so I am finally back and Star Wars has dropped a new trailer for the Star Wars Outlaw, an open world game set in the galaxy far, far away. So let's get straight into the breakdown.
These are dangerous times. At least that's what I hear. The Empire? They're everywhere. But the world here belongs to the syndicates.
We begin the trailer with a space battle between the Empire and the Rebels, which sets the time period of this game during the Galactic Civil War during the original trilogy. We see a few Rebel transports get attacked by some TIE fighters, and we also get to see a CR90 Corvette, the same type of ship as the tantive. Just then, a starfighter pulls out of hyperspace and collides into the Corvette, which echoes the scene in Rogue One where Darth Vader pulls out of hyperspace, colliding with an escaping rebel ship. We get to see some stormtroopers, but we quickly cut to the Pyke syndicate, which really sets the tone and focus of the entire trailer, that being the underworld of Star Wars. Now, the Pykes were of course one of the most powerful criminal organizations out there, originating from the planet Obadiah. The Pykes have played a pretty massive role in galactic-wide events, from the assassination of Jedi Master Sifo dyas to being part of the Shadow Collective. The Pykes are certainly a force to be reckoned with. We then see what looks to be someone in carbonite being escorted by two Gamorrean guards, and if you look in the background, the planet we are on is likely going to be Tatooine, with the iconic two suns setting over the horizon. Which could also mean that the person in carbonite here might also be Han Solo. And if this is indeed the case, then Star Wars Outlaw would be taking place in between Empire Strikes Back and the Return of the Jedi. And Han Solo showing up is certainly a possibility. After all, the entire game seems to be all about the criminal underworld, and Han Solo has always been our first look into the seedy underbelly of the Star Wars galaxy. The appearance of these Gamorrean guards on Tatooine also means that the Hutts will likely be featured quite prominently in the game as well. After all, if you have a story about the criminal networks of Star Wars, you really need to include the Hutts in some shape or form. It's also worth mentioning that the Hutts are still at this point one of the, if not the most powerful criminal faction under Jabba the Hutt, so we can really expect to run across the Hutts throughout the game. We then see a Celestin get executed, and my first impressions was that the executioner might have been a Pyke, but looking at the mask, it's notably different, so this could very well be a new character or faction that we have yet to learn about.
If I want to survive, I have to play their game. Looks like I'm all in.
She's in here somewhere.
On second thought, I'm out.
There she is!
Back my whole life. And now, I just need a chance to finally be free. Wherever that takes me.
We then get to see a cantina scene where we meet the hero of the story, Vess. And we then see her playing Sabacc, the iconic card game that has been featured many times in Star Wars. But the scene here most notably echoes the scene in the Solo movie, where we see Han and Lando play the game. Both scenes even have that same yellowish lighting, so it's pretty clear that the trailer is trying to evoke that same feeling. The camera pans down and we are introduced to Nix, Kay's companion, a sort of dog-like alien creature that has clearly been inspired by real-life axolotls. And it wouldn't be a game of Sabacc without some level of cheating, and we see Kay play against a Quarren and an Aqualish, and both species were quite known for their involvement in the underworld. We have previously seen an Aqualish crime family on Tatooine in the Book of Boba Fett, and we've also seen Aqualish smugglers and criminals in The Mandalorian. The game of sabacc gets interrupted as two bounty hunters enter the cantina carrying a bounty puck with K's face on it, and the bounty puck is something that we've seen quite often in The Mandalorian. And while it's not certain as to who these bounty hunters are, this portion of the trailer is probably pointing towards a notoriety-based game mechanic, where playing as K, the bigger missions you succeed in, the greater the notoriety you have, meaning more and more powerful criminals will be interested in hunting you down. On the other hand, it could also be the case that the more missions you fail could also end up leading to crime lords wanting to hunt you down, sort of like how Jabba was looking for Han Solo in the original trilogies after he dumped a bunch of cargo to outrun Imperials. And this probably won't be a game-changing mechanic, as Jedi Order does have some element of this. It's still a pretty crucial mechanic if you're going to tell a story about the criminal underworld. Nick saves K from a blaster shot, but it kicks off a brawl in the cantina, so no surprise there. Nix and K make their escape, and K drops what looks to be a thermal detonator. The soundtrack here, I must say, really stands out. There is a pretty clear rousing theme that sets this game apart from Fallen Order, and parts of the soundtrack actually reminded me of the Kingsmen theme. The basic premise of the story is really all about K seeking out fame and riches, which is very similar to how the Han Solo movie begins. And if you take a look at what K is wearing, her character design certainly does evoke that Han Solo jacket look that we see in the movie. And so don't be surprised if K's impetus as a character is the same or similar to that of Han Solo.
Get off my ship, Jalen.
Give me a chance. You're gonna have to trust me. It'll be dangerous, risky. But if you pull this off, you'll never look over your shoulder again.
We then meet Jalen, and first things first, I had to say that Jalen's character design really reminded me of Kyle Katarn. I mean, the color palette is quite similar, and even the haircut seems to evoke this. There is also a reprogrammed commando droid sitting next to him, and commando droids are of course from the Clone Wars era and were featured most recently in the game Jedi Survivor. Jalen promises K a heist of a lifetime, which really sets up this Jalen character to be some sort of a mentor to K as her journey begins. It's also worth noting that based off this conversation, it sounds like K and Jalen already have some sort of a history that occurred outside what we see in this game, which sort of juxtaposes Han's meeting with Beckett in the Solo movie, where in the beginning it's really Solo trying to get in with Beckett, whereas here it's the other way around, with Jalen trying to convince K to take on a job. But given that this is a story about the underworld, I wouldn't be too sure about trusting Jalen completely. We get a few shots of Kay going on missions, including a shot of her opening a vault, but the most interesting shot comes later where we see a Rancor. Now, seeing a Rancor in a Star Wars game isn't all that surprising, especially given that Jedi Survivor most recently did it. But what's actually really interesting here is where the Rancor is. Judging by the background, there is actually a very good chance that what we are looking at is the Rancor pit from Jabba's palace. The light shining down could very well be the trapdoor from above, and given how the trailer presented this shot, it is eerily similar to what we saw in the Return of the Jedi. And knowing that we will be on Tatooine at some point during this game, it wouldn't be too far-fetched of an idea to consider that we might end up in the Rancor pit having to find a way to escape.
The underworld shows no mercy. But it's a big galaxy out there, and I'm gonna risk it all.
We see Kay exiting hyperspace and looking at a city from a distance, and this here could very well be the planet Kijimi, which was first shown in The Rise of Skywalker. And it does make sense that Kijimi would be one of the places where we could visit, given that it was a hub for criminal activity, especially for the spice trade, which was something that Poe Dameron was a part of alongside Zori in the gang known as the Kijimi Spice Runners. And we don't know for a fact that at this point in time, the Kijimi Spice Runners did end up at odds with the Pykes Syndicate, simply due to the fact that both groups were heavily involved in the spice trade. We then get a shot of a man looking at the horizon, and this is taking place on Canto Bight, the casino world that was first introduced in The Last Jedi. And it's really no surprise that this world is making an appearance, especially given that the galaxy's most powerful and richest criminals would probably be found there. And I think giving players the opportunity to explore this planet and maybe even cause a bit of mischief is something that the game has to allow. I mean, it is an open world game after all. We then see a member of the Pyke syndicate examine what looks to be a kyber crystal, using a device around it that seems to measure its purity or authenticity. And showing the kyber crystal here could very well mean that it will be the focus of the game, and perhaps what Jalen was talking about when mentioning a heist of a lifetime. We do know for a fact that kyber crystals were valuable, especially on the black market, but its value would probably be even more inflated as the Empire is constructing a second Death Star. And given that the first Death Star took up a substantial amount of kyber crystal, it stands to reason that the second one will be no different. So perhaps what the game might be heading towards is Kay launching a heist to steal a substantial amount of kyber crystals before being confronted with a possible moral conundrum that might mean things don't end the way she probably would have expected. The Pykes are probably going to be the biggest antagonists in this game given how heavily they were featured, and it's going to be interesting to see how their interest in the kyber crystals will affect the Empire. We then get a shot where we see Kay looking out at a mushroom structure of some sort, and this right here really reminded me of Mount Tantive from the Bad Batch. Given its dome shape and the carved out structure in between, the two look really similar. And the trailer has already told us that this is indeed an Imperial base, with TIE fighters and an Imperial shuttle flying in the background. And given that the Star Wars Outlaw does take place after the events of the Bad Batch, what we could be seeing here is the aftermath of what happens in the Bad Batch, after the team tried to rescue Crosshair and Omega. I mean, the broken part here could very well be caused by the Zillo Beast escaping from captivity as well. Now, in all honesty, it's unlikely that this is Mount Tantive, as the surrounding environment looks nothing like what we see in the Bad Batch show. The environment just seems a little too different. However, it could be a military installation with a similar design. Kay flies through a battle between Imperials and Rebels, and we see a few Nebulon B frigates and an Imperial Star Destroyer in the background. And the way Kay flies through the battles really shows how much of a third party she is in the ongoing galactic civil war. It's also worth mentioning that what this could mean is that Kay might be given the options to run missions for the Rebels or even the Empire depending on the credits. And I think if the game gives players the options to do so, essentially taking part in the Civil War as a mercenary, bounty hunter, or smuggler, that would be really awesome. As I've mentioned earlier, the game seems to be taking a lot of inspiration from the Solo movie, and rightfully so, and with this game slated to be released in 2024 next year, I seriously cannot wait. Anyways, that's all for this breakdown. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. As always, be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. I am the Lost Acolyte,
And I have spoken.